Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome you to today's special lecture in the online interactive lecture series, which are being organized by the INO project for many weeks now. We are very happy. Today we have Dr. Amit Roy, former director of IUAC New Delhi, going to talk on do people listen to your talk? So it is special because it is actually on how to give a talk, right? So I would like to take a couple of minutes to formally introduce today's speaker, though I'm sure many of you on the call know him much more than probably I do. Dr. Amit Roy completed his master's in physics from Delhi University in 1968 and PhD from TIFR in 75. And he continued, of course, in TIFR till 1990 as associate professor. He spent about 2 years in Florida State, as well as also the postdoctoral he worked at KVI Netherlands and Argonne National Lab in US as visiting scientist. He joined the Inter-University Accelerator Center. I mean, at that time, of course, it's called Nuclear Science Center, as a senior scientist way back in 1991, and was its director from 2001 till 2013. That's more than 12 years. He led a team building the superconducting LINAC at IUAC and pioneered the development of niobium superconducting cavity for accelerators in India. Many of you know the success story about this particular development. He was DAE RRF Rajaramana Fellow at Variable Energy Cyclotron Center, Kolkata, till May 2017. And right now he's a guest lecturer at the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, Kolkata, and also the adjunct professor at Manipal Center for Natural Science. He's a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, India, and received the Eminent Scientist Award of the Indian Nuclear Society. He was the president of Indian Cryogenics Council for 2 terms and also the chairman of Asian Committee for Future Accelerators for 1 term. Okay, so what is context? In the today's lecture, he enjoys communicating science and has written the Great Experiment series in the Journal of Science Education, which is Resonance. So many of the younger participants probably this is a resource where you can look up for his writings on the Great Experiment series. So with those few words, now I take pleasure in inviting Dr. Amit Ray's lecture.
Okay, thank you, Satya. It's a great pleasure to address you all in this INO outreach talks. Of course, this is nothing to do with when Satya asked me to talk about, give a talk. I told him straight away that I can't talk about anything about the neutrino right now because I stopped working on neutrinos some 35 years ago. That was the last time with Vivek Datar, we did some work on that. But anyway, then he said, okay, this is a general talk. You can give other talks as well. So I decided that I'll talk about this. Now, all of you must have sat through many lectures and wished that you were somewhere else, not listening to it. But at the same time, you must have also listened to some fantastic lectures where you sat glued to your seat and would not like to miss a single word. I mean, I have one of our mentors here listening to me today, Professor Rajaji, and whose lectures I would never miss in TIFR. I would have always liked to go and listen to every word of his. And I'm sure all of you had that experience. So what makes some of the talks interesting and some of the talks are not interesting? Now, why do you have to make the talk interesting, first of all? Because giving a talk means that you have some idea which you want to convey. You want to transmit some ideas to the audience, to your listeners. So you are a transmitter, and the audience is a receiver. Now, if there is a good communication requires a strong signal from the transmitter. Transmitter has to be functioning very well. The receiver must be tuned, and there should be very little noise to distract. So these are the basic things of having a good communication. And in fact, it is necessary that you have a good communication. Otherwise, all that effort that is going in for your preparation, as well as those who listen, their time is wasted. So now, for whom is this lecture addressed to? Uh, who should listen to this talk? It should be anyone who wants to spread her or his ideas, to increase her or his influence, and to advance a career. Because if you are able to, if you have done something, it is not enough to do good research. You must be able to communicate your research to others. Because only when you are able to communicate and convince people of your ideas, then only people will hire you, give you a job. They will be able to value you as your peers will value you, and you will be able to get some grants for your for carrying on your work further. Also, you can convince others to collaborate with you. So this is important to give a lecture properly so that you can influence people and motivate them to come to your ideas. Now you have about 2 minutes before your audience goes like this. If you're not able to capture them, so what you would like to your audience to be like this, fully attentive throughout your lecture and listen to your words. Now, how do you do that? So you must have been to many conferences also and seen that this happens. And some of the talks are like that, some of the talks are not. Now, this is for changing from the first this figure, disinterested and audience, to an interested audience. You have to do something. Certain steps have to be taken so that people do follow you. So how do you do that? You do that by knowing your audience. You must know your audience, whom you are addressing. You must have that particular resonance with your audience. If you can establish a resonance, like in a communication device, if your transmission is in a particular signal and the audience is not accepting that signal because their basic knowledge, their background is different, then obviously you will not be able to communicate efficiently. So you must know your audience properly. Pitch your talk according to the audience. The talk that you will give to people working only in your field will be something. Then if you go to the bigger, let's say in your group, when you give a talk, you will give a certain way. When you give a talk to the institution, the overall institution, you will have to plan your talk differently. And when you talk to the public, to the say, for example, outreach program or in the school or a college somewhere else, it has to be completely different. If you want to pitch your talk to a government official for funding, you have to pitch it completely differently, because their level of understanding and level of the point of view will be different. So you must adjust your talk according to the audience. So you must know something about the audience as much as possible before your lecture. Try to know as much as possible of the audience. And in the lecture, there may be a very varied audience of different backgrounds. Then you try to give everyone something to take back from your lecture so that they remember it. The purpose of your talk is not to impress the audience with your brain power, with your knowledge, with your intelligence, and to dump all your knowledge. Everything that you know, you don't want to tell the audience. It's not necessary. But your purpose is to give an intuitive feel for your idea, to make them eager to read your work, to engage, excite, and provoke them, to make them glad that they came to listen to you. Now, how to do that? We all know, we all love a story, good story. We have been brought up like that. Human beings have been, from the beginning, have been storytellers. Stories have been there throughout the history, and in your childhood also, we have learned through lots of stories. So learning through a story is an easy process for the human being. So when you are giving a lecture, follow the story structure. Story structure is that you have a build-up, you give the background, then you have a climax, something is to be reached. What are the problems in reaching your goal? That's the climb and the action. and then final, the result, the resolution of the problem. So this is the basic structure of the story. And all stories are like this, everything. I mean, the presentation, but the presentation, when you do, it's not just a pure story, but there is, it's like a report, partly reporting, along with the structure of it in this form of a story structure. But in a lecture, when you give a lecture with your idea, single word, you have done some experiment or some theory, you got some good results, you want to present it, you focus on that single story. In a lecture, it should be one story. And when you start your lecture, start with a hook. Means the very first thing you tell something which is of interest to the audience, and they find it something, some kind of a startling statement that is out of the ordinary. The more out of the ordinary, more you can surprise the audience, the more they will get attracted and interested in listening to you. It is not required to give the outline in the beginning. Many people give the outline, the structure of your lecture in the beginning, but it's not necessary. But it is necessary to give the outline at the end so that people remember what all you have talked about. And in your lecture, when you give, be enthusiastic about your giving your lecture, because if you are not enthused, you cannot enthuse the audience about your idea. You cannot light a fire without having a fire inside you. So lectures depend, like as Michael Faraday said, lectures depend entirely for their value on the manner in which they are given. It is not the matter, not the subject, so much as the man. Here he means, man means the person who is giving the lecture. So it is how you deliver, how you can present your facts is very important. It is actually much more important for changing the minds of people than what the actual fact is. Of course, in other areas of social sciences, it is much more so. But in the exact sciences, the subject matter is also important. So it is, you are appealing to the personal part of this thing in a little less, but you connect it personally to the audience, and then you will be able to change. So how you present, and that's why sometimes very good ideas do not take hold of, and not so good ideas can get a large traction because it is presented very well. So now in doing this, in getting to the final goal, so what to avoid and what are the things to do? What do we keep and what do we avoid? So first thing is, when you come to a lecture, this is, of course, I'm talking about a classroom lecture, not a online one, because online lectures are completely different. Here, I'm not able to see the audience. I don't know exactly how you are reacting. So that's completely different here. So I have to rely on the written word on the slides and my voice, whatever you are able to hear, by convey that thing. I can't get a feedback from immediate feedback, but it's important. All this lecture is this lecture is presented from the point of view of giving a classroom lecture or in person. So when you come in, you must appear, you give the appearance of confidence and be relaxed. Even if you're not, fake it. Fake the confidence and relaxed nature. Even if you are inside very nervous and shaky, don't show it, because you don't want to give the audience the feeling that you have very little, you don't know what you are going to talk about, and that you are in a hurry and so on. So be relaxed and confident. Don't wear clothes that distract. Avoid mannerisms that distract as you come in. I'll tell you about something which, from my own personal experience, in my Delhi University days, during the physics part, there was a professor. I'm not going to name him. He used to wear trousers, a shirt tucked inside trouser, but he will never wear a belt. So his trouser will go slowly, it will slip down. He will put it above his tummy, and then he had slight bulge tummy. He will pull it up, and slowly it will start slipping down. And after some time, he will pull it up again. So, and everybody in the class, we will be watching his his actions, that when is he going to next pull the trouser up. So it will distract completely from whatever he was talking about. So, there are mannerisms like that. People use different mannerisms which distract. So the idea of this particular slide, what I'm written here is that you should reduce the distraction. That means reduce the noise so that your signal is transmitted to the audience loud and clear, well above the no distraction. So avoid all distractions. Do not, for example, continuously move around the room or on the podium. But at the same time, do not stand still like a statue. You should have a little movement, but not too much. So this you will learn as you keep giving lectures. You will learn about it. How much to do that. Do not jingle keys in your pocket. Put your hand in the pocket. Take the hand out of pocket. Let the audience see your hands as well. And do some hand gestures, but do not overdo them. Do not act, as I said before, do not act nervous and confused, and do not ramble incoherently. Make your statements in a coherent and measured manner. Now, all great scientists are not great lecturers. And a very prominent example is that of Niels Bohr. For example, I've taken this from Niels Bohr's Nobel Prize acceptance speech, and you can see the sentence. It is a single two sentences are there only in this whole paragraph. And if you read it, I'm not going to read it to you, but you can look at it later on. You'll find that the way he starts, it's actually nobody will be interested. I mean, nobody will be able to follow this when you first hear this, except for some persons who are already familiar with everything that he's talking about. So this is a kind of disaster as far as a lecture giving to the general public. So it's a things to avoid. So what do? What you have to do is, this is what I've given examples of things to avoid. Now I'm talking about something that you do. What do? You go from simple to the specific. Start with a simple thing in the topic that you have chosen or the idea you want to say. Build up from the simple basic foundations and then come to the specific. So but do not give general examples. Give specific examples of the principles and then come to your point. Use simple, short sentences. Do not use big sentences. It's difficult to follow for the audience. Avoid jargons. Now, sometimes you can say that, yes, in technical terms, when you are giving a lecture in very technical lecture, you have to use some jargons. But then make sure that every jargon that you utter, every acronym that you say, talk about, you explain beforehand in plain and simple terms. Only then you use the jargon later on. So first define your jargon, what it means, because for you who have been working in the particular field for maybe tens of years, it's very simple. Everybody, you should know. You think that everybody knows it, but when you're talking to the general audience, the audience cannot know. Even if they're new, they will have forgotten. So try to make eye contact with the audience. Now, this, of course, in the online, I'm not able to make the eye contact with you, so I don't know. In the lecture, when I give a lecture, I always like to keep lights on so that I can see the faces of the audience. Because only when you make eye contact, you know exactly whether they are listening to you or engaged or not. And if you find that by looking at the faces and the look at the eye, you will know that they are switched off or not. And if so, if a large number of them have already switched off, try to change you go back and address that issue by changing the topic slightly. Tell a story, tell something, ask a question or something so that you wake people up. So talk to now the other thing to do is, many times you put the slides up and you will find persons only looking at the screen and writing and talking about the various things that is written on the slide and basically talking to the screen. But that's not the thing to do. You should always face the audience as much as possible. If you have to point out something on the screen, you try to put yourself at an angle to the audience and the screen, so that you will be able to see how the reaction is. Now, speak up. Speak up means you have to talk about in a volume so that at the back of the class of the room, people are able to hear you. Whether it's a microphone or not, you should speak up in a proper in a volume so that it's audible very clearly at the right up to the back. Now, the speed should be such, it should be measured. It should not be too fast, like a rush thing. People give the impression that you are in a hurry and you are to catch some flight right after the lecture. It should not be, that kind of impression should not be given. The tone should be such that you should have some modulation in your voice. Because if you do in a monotone, it will be very soporific. It will induce sleep. Already you have people are looking at the slides and it's partially dark, the room. And especially if it is in the afternoon, after a meal, a large number of people will fall asleep. So if you are droning in a monotonous voice, so make the ups and downs of your voice. Moderate your voice. And also one thing you should remember, that when you end a sentence, you should not suddenly increase the pitch, that the frequency at the end. Ending with a high frequency suggests that you have doubts in your mind about what you are saying. And it's like almost like a questioning, like ends up as a question. So if you want to you are communicating some ideas, you want to give the feeling that you're confident, you know about what you're talking about, then you must go at the end. Do not increase the frequency at the end. Make it an even frequency, on the same frequency, on the modulation of the voice. Encourage questions in between and have checkpoints in between. Now, this is important. That's why I put it in red. Checkpoints in between means this has been found by actual research that in a lecture, normal lectures are usually 40 to 45 minutes or so, even in classroom lectures, 40 to 50 minutes. And it has been found that the students, after 10 minutes, even those who are interested, their interest goes down and has a minimum point around 10 minutes time, approximately. Around 10 minutes of time, it wanes. So if you have to give some new ideas, you make some breaks in your lecture such that the interest is again rekindled. So what do? You break your total lecture of 40 minutes into 4 segments. So make the segments different. So you suddenly change track, and you are maybe in between throw a question to the audience, or say something, make a small short story, or give some personal references, etc., to break the monotony. This is important, so that you can again increase the interest, because it is found that the interest lags, and then interest picks up again at the end when the speaker says, now to summarize, and then everybody wakes up at that point and want to listen to the summary. So this is the in between. If you do approximately 10 minutes intervals, you give some breaks and switch gear. Using humor is very good if you can, but then humor takes practice. It requires that the humor it must be contextual. It should not be completely out of text, out of context, something else. It should be connected. Secondly, it should also be understood by the audience. That means if you have gone somewhere else where the idioms, the phrases are different, people use it. So you must be familiar with those, and then in the humor use that, so that the audience understands what you're talking about. Otherwise, your humor will fall flat. It will backfire. Avoid too much of technical details in your presentation. Even if you have done because this is a very difficult thing to normally a tendency, something to resist. It's a temptation too much, because you have worked for years. on this thing. Your blood, toil, and sweat. You have sweated. You have found out something, and you have yourself found. You know that this is something really nice. I have found out. I have to tell the audience everything about it. But no, it's not necessary. They are not interested in your all the gory details which you have gone through. They want to know what exactly you've done. So avoid the technical details unless it is in your group seminar where you are talking to your only colleagues. There the details can be talked about. Or you are teaching a class in a particular technical class where you of course have to go through all the steps. But there also, in a way, even when you're teaching a class and giving steps, you should try to make it a little more interesting by throwing in some stories or some problems, etc. in between. Now, in my this is from my own experience, my own when I gave a lecture the very first colloquium I gave at TIFR, and this is what I didn't know at that time how to give a proper lecture. And that's why I did this. And this is what I won't do today. I mean, I did something about isospin mixing in those days to find out the isospin mixing coefficients. And this is what one of the slides I had shown in the colloquium. This was 1975. I gave the colloquium in TIFR, my first colloquium. And there I wrote all these things down because I had done, I thought this is something which I have found. And how to do this, two-state mixing and three-state mixing. So I wrote it all details. I make this slide. This is one of my slides from that presentation. And today, if I do, this is absolutely off-putting because I don't think anybody would like to read through all this. And it is not possible in a lecture. So what I would like to do today if I would have just put this two-state mixing, three-state mixing, and the final result. That's how I will present it and explain. So you can try to, whenever you have the tendency to write down everything, cut it down to the bare minimum that is required for the audience to understand what you are talking about. Now, this is the part about I want to talk about this is all the general things which I talked about, the behavioral patterns and how you approach the lecture. Now, about PowerPoint. Now, PowerPoint, everybody, all of us use PowerPoint. Now, PowerPoint is a great aid. It saves time. But in the PowerPoint, you must have come across many examples where people write the PowerPoint. It's it is a little comforting, and sometimes it's kind of, people feel it's secure because if you put it down in the PowerPoint, then you don't have to remember anything. It's all there. So you have to just do it. But don't do that. This is not, people have not come to read your PowerPoints. They have come to listen to you. So you write down only pointers on the PowerPoint slide, so that you can speak about it. You can talk about it. You can explain. Don't write everything and read. It's a cardinal sin to write everything on the PowerPoint and read it. So when you're using PowerPoint, don't use all of PowerPoint's transitions, fades, backgrounds, and sound effects. Don't use that. You don't have to use that. Keep it simple. Keep the slides simple and clutter-free. Present only one main idea per slide. Do not crowd the slide. The natural tendency is to cram things too close together so that they will fit in the space, because you like to write down everything and fit it in the slide. So you fill up all the entire area, but you should not do that. And the thumb rule is, how many slides should you have? The thumb rule is about 1 minute to a slide to 2 minutes per slide. This is the thumb rule. You should not put any slide on which you spend an average of 1 minute. So average is that. So if you are giving a 40-minute talk, you should not exceed 40 slides in any way. If you can make it smaller, better. Unless, of course, you are only going to show some pictures you want to flash. Those you can add additional, but any slide which has got material you want to convey it requires minimum of 1 minute per slide. So you should keep the number of slides like that. Make short slides simple. Use big fonts, no fancy fonts, because it's not necessary. It's again distracting. All the ideas that I'm going to put here are these from the point of view of transmission, receiving, and noise, distortions on the way. So you try reduce all distractions. So use simple, stick to certain fonts, like say Arial or Times New Roman or Calibri, simple fonts, and which are nice to read, and it has got enough spaces in and around the letters so that they can be seen very clearly. And use at least 22 to 24 point sizes so that it's visible from the back of the room. If anything lower than 22 point size points font will not be readable from the back of the room, of a normal lecture room. If it's a bigger auditorium, of course, you will try to use the still bigger fonts. But of course, in the auditorium, you'll have a bigger screen as well. So ratio-wise, it more or less works out the same. 22 to 24 size fonts is the minimum size. You can use bigger fonts. Now, if you copied any slide, you must always give credits. It's absolutely important that you give credits when you put these slides. Now, next is landscape format is standard, of course. Use the page effectively. Fill the page, but do not overfill. Use the blank spaces to improve separation of topics, ideas, etc. Check your spelling very well, because it is very jarring if there is a spelling mistake in your slide, because everybody will be if there is a spelling mistake, everyone's eyes will be focused to that, rather than they will start missing the other things written on the slide or whatever you're speaking. Avoid going to the very bottom of the slide, often not visible to the audience, because the last few lines may not be seen. Now, do not adopt the revealing little by little, or what I call striptease approach to the showing transparency. There are some people feel that you should this gives a little additional, let's say, pep to their talk by putting in one line by line, but this is absolutely, I think we should not do it unless it's necessary to separate out certain ideas. So maybe one or two things, but do not do this reveal little by little line by line approach. So showing transparencies is very irritating to the audience. Use simple graphs and charts. Now here I like to, especially for the students who are starting off, I like to tell them that you must label all the axes properly, show the error bars and data only up to significant digits, not what the computer printout gives you. If the computer printout gives you, I have seen people presenting data as saying 1.0334 plus minus 0.235. Absolutely ridiculous. You should show data only up to significant digits, which is justified by the errors. Keep only data that you are going to present. Do not put any extra data on your slide that you are not going to explain or present. If you have lots of curves and lots of data, throw them out. You make a new one, fresh one for your talk, where you are going to only show data that you are going to present. When you're using simple bullet points, no fancy designs. Again, the idea is not to distract. Use animations. Animations are good only when you must, but use it on very sparingly. Only if you have some real nice animations, then only use it. If you want to, sometimes there is a motion, you want to explain certain things, particular action of a particular, say, an equipment or so it sometimes may help. Insert a video clip if relevant, but avoid the animations, etc. if you can. Minimize them. Then color. on the slides. Avoid overusing color for most tests. Watch out for the bad contrast. For example, yellow on white. Never use that. Never use pastel colors on the slides. It's very difficult to see the pastel colors. Use either dark colors on a light background or a light color on a dark background. Do not use black, red, green, etc. on dark backgrounds. And this is I've given you the place from where I copied the slide. This particular one, seminar on seminars. There you will find there are a lot of other tips on the using PowerPoints. Now, when you're going to somewhere else and giving a lecture, you should keep a PDF copy in addition to PPT, because sometimes you will find that the Microsoft Office or the presentation that you are using in the particular computer there where you're giving a lecture may not be amenable to your PPT, especially the symbols will get completely mixed up. And you discover it only when you project it, and then you also will not remember all these symbols that you have put in there. So it may be sometimes so it's always safer to keep a PDF copy unless there are animations in your presentation. Have printed notes with you also, because sometimes if the power switch goes off, the slide projector goes off, you can at least keep talking, looking at the notes. So now that your presentation is ready, you have made your presentation. Of course, before the presentation, it goes without saying that you have done a good work. Before that, you have some good ideas or some good results which you want to present, and you made your slides presentation according to whatever the best practices that we have discussed about. Now, what do you do now? What you do is practice. Now, practice in front of your friends, your spouse, friends, anybody who will give you very critical comments. Because this is an important thing to do especially when you go out to present outside especially the important presentation. Must prepare beforehand. Practice it several times. You time it yourself. Stand in front of the mirror. Sometimes talk about it and time it with a stopwatch and see whether you are able to complete it in time and the number of and when you start presenting or you're talking about the slide, you will find that you may have to change the slides order. Sometimes the contents also you have to change. Sometimes you have to add or subtract. So this is very important. And do not ever come to a situation where you have to go stand up in front of giving a lecture and say, apologize that, so I'm very sorry, I just came straight from the airport and I have not been able to prepare for my presentation. No, you could have done it in the flight itself, or before you started from your home. You should have done it, or wherever you are going. So you should not be in a position where you have to apologize for not being prepared in any way. And do not read from paper. Do not read from the paper your write-up and keep reading about and give a presentation. You should practice your presentation very good. Thing is, in the beginning, the very first few sentences, completely memorize it, so that this will give you additional confidence that you can start. And normally, once you get a start, you are able to take off, because the initial inertia is always a little more. And our nerve, all of us are nervous. Even after 50 years of my lecturing, I still am nervous a little nervous when we start the talk. But once you get going, it is much easier. Finish on time is very important. It is a cardinal sin to exceed your allotted time. And in the question answer session, be polite to the audience. Even if you feel that person is trying to heckle you or pull your leg, somebody, who answer very politely. And sometimes you can easily, there is a very simple trick to avoid keeping your cool, is that do not argue with somebody who is very, very insistent and strong. So try to avoid, sidestep the person and say, you are, yes, yes, whatever he is saying is interesting and very important, and we'll think about it, and I will talk about it. So you sidestep the issues, even if you feel like punching the guy on the nose. So these are the things that you try to follow in giving a lecture and trying to be under your control. So finally, the result is that the audience feels that you are in control, that you have the idea, which you know, which you have understood, you have worked hard, and you know exactly what you have done, and you are able to convey the information properly, so that they might feel enthused about it. So in summary, these are the points to remember: prepare and rehearse, memorize the first few lines. You expect to be nervous. To cure that, take deep breaths before you start your lecture. Focus on your audience by knowing the audience well. Show enthusiasm in giving lecture. Keep the thing simple as possible. Even if there are experts sitting in the audience, they will also be happy that if you are able to give it a simple picture and tell your idea in a simple. Even the experts will be happy. They will also appreciate it. Remember the 10-minute rule I talked about, that giving breaks in the lecture make it into segments, and be polite and also honest about your work and credits wherever it is due. Continuing the summary, so identify the things to remember is 4D. Identify the audience, engage the audience, provide appropriate context, and give a take-home message. People may then listen to your lecture. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Amit. I know it's very tough to give this lecture on how to give lecture, because, I mean, whether one notices or not, we kind of always have this problem of how well we'll stick to our own kind of what we are saying on the slides and so on. But I was really respect you. I will really appreciate when every point that I saw in this slide is also, self-referenced, and I could see that you followed everything so well what you spoke, including even the ending your lecture on dot at 6:45, and of course you covered a great deal of things, and not only about how to prepare slides, but also many times the problem, as you said, is how do you actually deliver it. It's also true that not every great scientist is a great speaker, and also sometimes maybe vice versa. But sometimes probably people say it's a great gift to be able to speak well on the thing that you worked so well and for so long, and spend, as you said, blood and sweat on the subject. And very, very nice the way you kind of put it in a nutshell. And I hope all the participants really enjoyed your lecture, and going to take a few points back with them when they give the next talk probably. And yes, you also mentioned somewhere now suddenly talking to a computer, rather giving it
Yes,
change things dramatically. Maybe one requires an annexer to your talk on how to talk to your computer and so on. So I hope we'll have you an occasion in future to again interact with you. But thank you very much. With that, I also would like now keep the discussion on, and so I request the participants those who are on the Zoom, of course, they can raise their hand, and Dr. Amit will be able to answer your questions or comments or anything. And those on the YouTube, of course, can type in your questions. I'll read for you the question to the speaker, and of course, you will answer. Of course, I see just one comment already on the YouTube. It says it was by Pankaj Giri. It says it was very nice, sir. Definitely to apply in our presentation. Thank you. But this is not a question; it's more of a compliment. Yeah. So any questions? Yeah. Suresh Kumar has a question. I'm going to
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, Suresh.
yeah.
Good evening to everybody. Now, as you said correctly, that now e-meetings are happening. As
Yeah.
he said that on the stage you should walk little bit, not much. So on the e-meeting,
No, you cannot do that. You cannot, unfortunately. I mean, that's something which is basic. And in fact, these e-meetings, e-talks are really that way completely different in that sense. I have not yet worked out the because this is only very recently I've been giving e-talks. In fact, I've given a set of lectures also for the students in cultivation of science on the net. But the thing is, I still have not figured out all the dynamics of it yet. So I need to have a little more time before I can really talk about it. But certainly, one thing which I found is that the difference in the giving a webinar is that you have to write the points much more clearly. I mean, you have to logically put it on the screen because you are not able to, effectively. Because what you do is our communication is not just always on the written word. Because if you are in front of the class, there is a lot of non-verbal communication going on. The body language, the way you speak, the way you are, your posture, the how you smile, and things like that. So those things are very important, and that's really creates the bond between the audience and the speaker much more than just exactly the words that you speak. So this is missing in the on the lecture. So yeah, so everything has to be written down very logically, much more logically on the slide.
very correct.
Very correct.
I was hoping some humor will be there in your talk.
No, again, humor is, as I said, if you remember, I had put in the slide on humor that you must know exactly the context. And again, in this particular lecture, since the audience is very varied, I didn't want to put in any humor which will not be really in that way. I couldn't find a contextual humorous things.
Great.
May I just say something, please?
Yeah, please.
Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Amit, it was an excellent exposition of what one should do in the classroom. But wish I could have removed all my mistakes about half a century back.
Well, I also wish I did that. I told you I would give my example in the first colloquium in PIFR. For me now, if I analyze it now, it was a disaster the way I gave it.
Yeah, may I say something else also?
Yeah,
I
please.
attended a pre-Nobel Prize lecture in Sweden about maybe 60 years back or somewhere around that. The lecturer who gave the Nobel lecture, pre-Nobel lecture, there was one gentleman sitting, one professor sitting. He was smiling at the ideas which was being proposed. And the lecturer became very angry. But then after the lecture, somebody advised to him that, look, he did this work maybe 20 years back. So you should have said, yes, I appreciate, I am very happy that I had the good fortune of having that work and I could build my work on it.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Sure. Amit, Vandana had a question.
No, I didn't have a question. I just had a comment. Since Amit mentioned about in the webinar, we are not been able to make the contact with audience. I think it gets even more difficult when you actually are teaching over the
Yes.
web, the students. So in fact, we had this summer school recently, and then you are teaching students whom you have not even met. So it is really, really very challenging to put that in there. So, and I think you outlined a lot of things very nicely for keeping keeping audience engaged in your presentation. So it's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you, Vandana. And for the lecture, for the classroom and the e-classrooms, I found that one way of engaging and finding out getting some reaction is to pose short questions like a quiz thing. You can put in the thing, and during your lecture, put some short quizzes, and then try to get the feedback answers. So that way you will know how many people are responding.
Yeah.
Very short quizzes. I mean, where one line answers. And
both the most of the platforms offer these e-polling things, so that is true. But I'm just saying that when you do it with a completely, I mean, see, it's like you write down something, you are looking around to see whether they have got it or not, and then that is there.
I agree. I mean, it's a completely different ballgame.
So as I was telling some people, like talking to the computer, you realize why in old days the classical singers had tough time in singing in the studio because they did not like to.
There's no feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a question from Ajay.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Just one question. Usually in IIT we have about 120 to 150 students sometimes in the class.
Yes.
Okay. So no matter how you try to prepare your lecture, how you deliver your lecture, there will always maybe 10, 15 students out of 150 may not be interested. Should I consider that as my failure, or maybe it is not me who is doing good job, or I should leave it?
No, you don't consider it as a failure if it happens, because if you know one of the best lecturers in the world, Richard Feynman. If you read his books I think at the end, he talks about in the prologue, there he says that he gave a lecture series, it's a famous Feynman lecture series, and it was attended by 180 students. And at the end of the lectures, Feynman thought that his lectures were a failure.
Okay.
That was his own opinion about his lectures. Mm-hmm. But his tutors, 180 students, they were then divided into different tutorial groups, and the tutors were doing the problems and solving the problems with them. So they said that no, they told Feynman that no, this is not failure because your lecture has been taken very well. And we found that about 30-40 students out of their 180 were excellent. They followed everything that you talked about, and they did the tutorial very well. They were all into it. So then Feynman writes that maybe I was only targeting those 30-40 students. But then he said, at the same time, I remembered, this Feynman, he writes, so I remembered the words of this guy who wrote the Rise and Fall of Roman Empire. He says that power of instruction is of little efficacy, except in those happy circumstances where it is superfluous. So I mean, Feynman talks about this. So what are we? I mean, we happy if I would say 10% of your class, if they follow you at any given time, it's a great achievement for a teacher.
It is most of the time. It is more than 10% of the students. They are really interested. They are always interested.
Then it is fantastic. It's very good. But of course, again, Feynman was asked about his lecture that how did he prepare it? He said, I try to throw in lots of things, various things, not a straightforward. He said he puts in a lot of some history of the subject, some anecdotes in between, some real derivations and stuff like that, real tough ones, things and everything. So that he says, I don't know out of the students who likes what. So they will get something of their. They may not get the whole lecture, but a little bit they will get. And if they get a little bit, they will be attracted to your lecture.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Are there any more questions? While maybe waiting for one more rising hand, I would like to myself share, since there was a reference about IIT, so I just wanted to share it with your permission. Of course, the IIT Bombay used to have this course on presentation skills or communication skills. And this is a subject which is not for grades, but so-called pass or no pass. And since it is not for grades, also this is compulsory for all the post-graduation and PhD students. So there used to be 300-400 students. So it is typically held in a convocation center or PC Saxena auditorium or so. And as Ajay mentioned, most of the students used to kind of enjoy at the back because this is so-called not a technical course and so on. And it so happened that most of the students failed in this course because they didn't really focus on what was taught by the, of course, these lectures were extremely good, and often they were guest lectures from outside, and very, very, distinguished lecturers. So, but I really realized how important this particular subject is only when I really saw that it makes a big, big impact. One thing I really, with your permission, I would like to add to what you said is, I think modern day it is also becoming more important to not only about the technical aspects and the communication skills, but also the sensitivities that one kind of are living in. So quite often, things like how well you speak in terms of neutral gender communication, stereotyping. These are words or sentences that are even on the slide, certain written text is repelling a lot of audience in terms of how sensitive one is while either making slides. For sometimes even the photographs that we use, even the nationality of the people in the photographs that you use, and the units that you use in several slides, etc. Of course, may not be so much one sees in our domain of science and technology, but equally, I think, important these days. But also in other fields, which are like management and so on. But this has become a much more, I think, important parameter to keep in mind while we speak. Some things are, granted, taken for granted the way we speak. We are not really meaning to kind of say that, but I think we have to also express that by keeping these modern attributes to communication skills. I will say this, what is coming to my mind in that
Yes,
context.
I think correct. This is again very important. It's getting more and more important because as science says, the overall all over the world now, because people have not the respect that science used to get, say 30, 40 years ago, as a thing that seems to have gone down, and so the social aspects of science are becoming also important, more relevant. And so there, it's very important to think about the wordings that you use, the pictures that you use, as you pointed out, is very important, and we should be aware of it, because sometimes our behavior, we do it with all in good faith and without any bad intentions.
Bad intention.
But then we are taught in a certain, we are brought up in a certain way to use certain language, certain pictures, certain idioms, and so on, which have some bad connotations in the present world. So we have to actually be aware of it and try to avoid it consciously.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, we had the part of the curriculum textbooks or reference, a UNDP document on these aspects which I talked to you. It's very well written, and even today it gets updated, and it has a very nice way of do's and don'ts kind of thing, and it's quite good. Yeah. Now, meanwhile, we have a couple of more questions.
Can I just comment on this issue since you brought this up, Satya?
Yeah, I was about to take your question.
In fact, I think, one of the, just because since it's related, I thought I will speak here now.
Yeah, please go ahead.
See, one of the things, it's very nice that what both you and Amit said just now, but and also just in that connection that when people are talking about a humor or a joke which is bringing in the light-hearted, there, in fact, it's very important that you don't hurt people's sensibilities, because, something, a certain kind of a joke, which is okay if you crack on a tea table or in a casual conversation, but when you are at a podium and talk about it, I think it should be very careful, because this is again something, because these days, all kinds of things fly on WhatsApp, and then you are tempted to repeat the same thing, which is when you are talking from the podium or when you're giving a webinar, I think it's important to bear in mind that you stay what is to be quotes, let's say, politically correct.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the reason why when you said there's no humor, I had to see, I said the humor has to be contextual. It has to be, also the idioms have to be corrected. The local idiom, the people should be able to appreciate that, what the humor. So humor has to be used very, very carefully. You want to bring in the humor, it has to be absolutely, you have to make sure that it is really appropriate. Then only use it.
Well taken.
May I just make a very short comment, please?
Uh,
My
Say something.
experience at the University of Delhi, teaching at University of Delhi, I found that many of these students in the classroom, I am saying about the classroom, that they come pre-prepared on the topic on which you are lecturing. And what these students would really want to know is something that they could not understand reading from the book. And they expect the teacher to explain those. So the teacher has to pre-prepare himself that from the student point of view, what are the things they would not have understood properly, and try to emphasize on those. Just a comment only,
yeah,
please.
yeah. That's it.
Right.
We have another question from Professor Vivek Datar.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
This is not really a question, it's just a couple of comments. I think, yeah, it was a nice talk. There should be probably one such also for how to write a scientific paper. This will, I think, benefit our younger students
Thanks.
who
Thanks.
write their first paper.
I have a talk on that as well. And
Maybe you can give it sometime. Okay.
and there is
Good.
another talk which I had, which I thought I have given it a number of places, is that
Okay.
how to do, can you plan to do great research?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
That's even more general than that. Yeah. Okay. The other a couple of comments, of course, just bear out what you said in some of your slides is to be on time. I remember a classic lecture by Norman Ramsay in the Wednesday colloquium, and he ended precisely at 5 o'clock. I mean, he started maybe at 4 or 5, but his ending was exactly at 5 o'clock. Similarly, that you should not show too many slides, and there should be the material in the slide should be sparse. Another brilliant example I had the opportunity to see is a colloquium by Hans Bethe, and he had just, I think, 10 or 12 slides and very few equations written on them and material. And again, the same thing. I mean, his explanation of what was there was, I think, very nice to hear, rather than just read the material in the slides. So, these are just two examples I thought I would quote.
Yeah.
I think which I have
Very nice.
alluded to, mentioned.
Thank you. And are there any more questions or comments to the speaker? Okay, so if not, once again, on behalf of all the participants who are a little different today, I'm happy, and also it went quite lively because of excellent lecture by Dr. Amit, but also the nice discussion that came about later. So let us all thank once again Amit for his very nice lecture, and maybe we can start looking forward for his other lectures that he has in store. So maybe we'll have opportunity to call him for another one, maybe on the paper writing or any other lectures or experiments, how to run, how to build and run a good experiment, and so on and so forth. So with that, thank you very much once again, Dr. Amit, and take care. And yeah, okay. So I wish all of you to again take care of yourself and stay safe during these trying times, and come back on Monday. At the same time at 6 o'clock. I don't have it. The topic, this speaker is Sunil Mukhi, and he's going to talk on the predictions of various particles that we all see around from a theoretical perspective, and why they are so, and so on. So I don't have as of now the formal title from him, but I'm sure you'll agree that that will be another equally interesting talk. So he says that the talk is about different particles that were predicted by theory, like such as neutrinos, positrons, quarks, and etc. And then the reasons for these predictions. So this is the theme of his talk. So we invite all of you to be back again on Monday at 6 p.m. Until then, take care and stay safe. Good night, all of you.
Okay, good night. Thank you all.